Thank you very much for joining me again. This is a fresh unit on goods issue processing. Now in this set of videos, we're going to be looking at the various processes and scenarios that fall under goods issue postings. And you'll find that a lot of what we're going to look at is going to be very similar to what we've already seen in goods receipt processes, but there are a few things that are going to be unique to goods issue processing that we'll look at. So in summary, we're going to look at goods issue posting, the different types of goods issue postings. We're going to look at stock removal with transfer orders when we're doing goods issues. And we're also going to look at how we process returns deliveries. This is usually called complaints processing. And we're also going to take a brief look at transportation planning and how we can go about that in the system. In this introductory session, we're just going to go over an introduction to goods receipt processes. We'll look at stock removals for cost centers, stock removals for work orders, and stock removals with transfer orders. We're also going to touch on picking areas, an interesting concept, a critical concept in goods issue processes. So we'll first look at the first type of goods issue, that is a goods issue posting and subsequent stock removal. This type of goods issue does not involve an outbound delivery document. So the first scenario would be stock removal for a cost center. A cost center can represent a department in an organization. Typically what happens in a company is that sometimes departments request for certain materials to be removed from storage and brought or made available for them for use for different purposes. So that's what's going to be addressed by this process, the stock removal for a cost center. So this process begins with a goods issue in inventory management. And this goods issue is going to be followed by the creation of a transfer requirement, because once we've issued our goods in inventory management, we need to work on stock removal, which is a warehouse management process. And a transfer requirement is going to be generated, of course, alongside a material document and an accounting document to take into account the removal of stock from these storage locations. There has to be a material document and an accounting document created. Much like inventory management with goods receipts, this is also going to be happening with goods issues. Now, an interim storage area for goods issues is also going to be created. And this is basically a staging area in which we're going to have the goods that have been removed from storage sitting before they are picked or loaded. So this is the place where they're going to be stored before they are made available to the cost center. Now, with reference to the transfer requirement, we have to create a transfer order. A transfer order is created and for the removal of the particular material. And in this transfer order, information such as the receiving storage type and storage bin for the goods issue area, which is the staging area where the goods are going to be placed before they are made available to the cost center. This information is going to be found in the transfer order and is going to be obtained from the transfer requirement. Now, once the transfer order has been confirmed, meaning that the goods have been moved, once the transfer order has been confirmed, the process is complete and the material is now available to the cost center. So just to run through it, stock removal for cost center kicks off with a goods issue in inventory management. A transfer requirement is generated where warehouse management is involved. And with reference to that transfer requirement, we get a transfer order which contains the interim storage area for goods issue area and so on and so forth. And once the transfer requirement is generated, we create a transfer order with reference to it. And when the transfer order is confirmed, meaning the goods or the stock has been removed from storage, then that's when the material is made available to the cost center. So much like what we had with our goods receipt process, we're also going to make use of the concept of negative quants with goods issues. Negative quants are going to be used because when we have our goods issue in inventory management stock quantity is going to drop. But these don't immediately drop in warehouse management because we haven't performed stock removal. This is since goods issue kicks off the process and is followed by stock removal. So between the goods issue and stock removal, there's bound to be an imbalance in stock quantities. But by using negative quants, as we've seen before, we are able to account for this difference, and we are going to record the stock that has been removed as a negative quantity in order to keep warehouse management and goods issues in balance. So this negative quant is cleared. The negative quant is cleared once stock removal is complete. The second category of goods issue that we're going to look at that does not involve the outbound delivery document is the stock removal for our work order. Now, this is mapped pretty much the same way as the cost center stock removal. It starts off with a goods issue. A goods issue is posted for that work order. And we also have the same concept of negative quants created in the interim storage area for work orders. And following that, we create our transfer requirement, and then finally we wind up with our transfer order. And the confirmation of this transfer order is what's going to complete our process, also what's going to clear the negative quants that have been created in the interim storage area for work orders. This is basically almost exactly as what we have when we're removing stock for cost center, and the only difference would be probably the movement types and the interim storage areas. But otherwise, goods issue, storage removal for cost center and storage removal for work orders are pretty much mapped the exact same way. A key point for us to take into account is the use of transfer orders for stock removal. So let's just take a moment to look at stock removal with transfer orders. There are a few steps that the system takes when we're performing stock removal with transfer orders. And the first one would be determining the issuing storage type. Now, in customizing, there's what we call a search sequence, a default search sequence that a consultant may set or specify for a particular warehouse number. And this will really cut the system's work short because it only refers to that particular search sequence when determining an issuing storage type. The alternative way to set up the search sequence would be to place a special stock indicator in material master, in the master data for a particular material, which can also instruct the system as to where a particular material must be removed from. So in summary, we either use customizing settings or we use material master to guide the system in determining which storage type is going to be issuing the particular material that is required. Now, if you've been following these videos from the earlier sessions that we've had, you'll remember the concept of storage sections that we went through, and we said these are at the same level as picking areas. And just as a reminder, storage sections, we said that these are created within storage types as a means of partitioning our storage spaces, partitioning these storage spaces according to various requirements for material storage. And we gave the example of certain materials that may need to be stored in refrigerated areas or some in more heated areas for different storage reasons. And so we come up with storage sections as a means of partitioning goods that are to be put away into storage based on their storage requirements. And now, with goods issue processes, we have a similar grouping of products which we call a picking area. Now, picking areas, as we look at them with regard to goods receipt processes, are a section within a storage type. Just like storage sections, they are a section within a storage type in which all picking activities are carried out in the same way. So products, goods, materials with similar picking requirements are grouped according to a picking area. So, for example, we can have we have what we call cross-transfer order picking lists, which can be printed based on these picking areas. And these cross-transfer order picking lists will contain material quantities sorted by picking area, which means that the picking process that each of these materials are going to go through is going to be different per material or different per picking area. Now, this results in what we call transfer order splits, which are based on the different picking areas that are represented by the materials that are listed on our transfer orders. So with effect, we're actually going to have multiple transfer orders resulting from this transfer order split. Now, the advantage of having such a scenario is that it speeds up our shipping process because particular picking areas can be assigned to separate employees. And when the system is printing transfer orders, it then makes it possible for printing of transfer orders to be separated for the specific employee that takes care of a particular picking area. Instead of having one transfer order that represents all goods that are going to be picked in different ways based on their picking areas, every employee can receive a transfer order that is only specifically catered for their particular picking area. So separating goods according to their picking requirements is very useful, especially in terms of speeding up the shipping process by making parallel picking possible. Now we're going to take a look at outbound deliveries. Now, outbound deliveries are a lot like inbound deliveries, not really one for one, but outbound deliveries have a lot of shared characteristics with inbound deliveries, not only in terms of their structure, but also in terms of the way they work, the way they function. And so with outbound deliveries, basically what we have is an outbound delivery is created with the reference to a sales order. And sales orders, as we know at this point, are created in sales and distribution, as we probably should know at this point. Our sales orders are created from sales and distribution. And now as we create the sales order, the system performs what we call scheduling. Now we're going to look at scheduling in greater detail, but scheduling occurs at sales order level. When we create our sales order, the system is going to determine key dates associated with the delivery cycle at sales order creation. And now when we save our sales order, we're then able to create an outbound delivery with reference to that sales order. And as we create our outbound delivery, the system determines what we call our picking location, which is also known as our storage location, in that particular outbound delivery. And now, when we have our storage location determined, the system then checks that storage location to determine whether the storage location is warehouse managed. Now, this is a very key thing. The process and how this goes on is very different where a storage location is warehouse managed and where it isn't, where inventory management is able to complete the process without warehouse management, and where this whole process leans heavily on warehouse management. It's a very key thing to note. And so the system determines whether the storage location is warehouse managed. And if so, the system is then going to go ahead and display the warehouse number associated with that particular storage location. And the system in the outbound delivery is also, of course, going to display our overall picking status and the stock removal status for the particular order. And now when the system shows us our stock removal status, the user can be able then to determine whether or not a transfer order is going to be needed for stock removal in this case. Now, just to take a few steps back to sales order creation, it's important for us to go back there because two important things occur. First of all, we have shipment scheduling, where the system is determining particular dates that are going to be very key in the entire delivery process. So we just want to look at how the system comes to those dates. We also want to look at shipping point determination, which also occurs at sales order level. And finally, we also want to look at route determination, which is just a short one. That's a very brief one. So we're just going to go back to sales orders. Now, when we create a sales order, three particular things occur, as I've just mentioned. First of all, the system comes up with the requested delivery date. Secondly, the system is going to perform shipping point determination. And lastly, the system is going to come up with is going to perform route determination. Now, shipping point determination and route determination depend heavily on who the sold to party and shipped to party are. These are basically partner functions in sales and distribution. We're not going to go into detail on those, but they are basically the basis for the determination of our shipping point and our routes. Okay, now firstly, we're going to take a look at shipping point determination. Now, the shipping point is a very critical organizational unit in logistics execution. As a matter of fact, without the shipping point, we cannot process outbound deliveries. We cannot process any outbound deliveries without having a shipping point. It's a key and the very highest organizational unit when we're dealing with shipping. And so to come up with a shipping point, or to suggest or determine a shipping point, the system uses particular information, namely the shipping conditions, the loading group, and the delivery plant. So a combination of shipping conditions, loading group, and delivering plant give the system a shipping point. In customizing, what happens is that a different range of shipping conditions, loading groups, and delivering plants, a different combination of these objects are maintained, and each combination has a shipping point assigned to it. So now the system uses shipping conditions, which it finds in the customer master record, and it uses a loading group, which it finds in the material master data, and a delivering plant, which it can either find in customer master data, material master data, or the customer material info record if it exists. And it uses this combination of these objects to determine a shipping point, which is set in customizing. And now once this shipping point is set, this is where the deliveries are going to be processed from. Now it's also important to note that each delivery is processed by exactly one shipping point. And for example, if a number of materials are involved and the system comes up with different shipping points, then what happens is that a outbound delivery split is going to occur based on shipping point, because each delivery has to be processed by an individual shipping point. So if a collection of materials is involved in a sales order, and these materials, for example, have different loading groups, one is loaded via a crane, using cranes, for example, the other is loaded via, maybe it's a liquid and it's pumped. The system is going to determine separate shipping points in that situation. And this means that when we're processing the outbound delivery, a delivery split is going to occur based on these separate shipping points, and separate delivery documents are going to be created for each of the materials involved. Secondly, we're going to take a look at the route determination. Now, routes are basically logistics execution master data, and they stand for the difference between two destinations, the difference between two locations. Now, in order to determine routes, to determine which route the system is going to assign to a particular delivery, the system goes through a route determination procedure. And route determination can only be carried out after the shipping point is determined, because the shipping point is it contains information that the system uses in determining the particular route for that delivery. So when the system is performing route determination, it looks for firstly the departure zone. Now the departure zone, as I've just mentioned, the shipping point is very critical in the route determination process, because the departure zone is found from the shipping point. For every shipping point that is defined, a departure zone is automatically assigned to that shipping point. Secondly, the system is going to look at shipping conditions, which we've established are taken from our customer master record, the customer master record of the sold to party. The system is also going to look at the transportation group. Now, the transportation group is found in our material master record. And finally, the system also takes into account the transportation zone, which it obtains from the customer master record. So just to go over that again, in determining the route, the system takes into account the departure zone, which it gets from the shipping point, the shipping conditions, which it gets from the customer master record, the transportation group, which it gets from a material master, and also finally the transportation zone, which it obtains from the customer master record. Now, route determination is critical because it's basically the basis for transportation planning. Without route determination, we cannot have transportation planning. And it also gives us a basis, it gives the system a basis for calculating certain dates that are critical in the transportation planning process, such as staging dates, loading dates, transportation planning dates, and the goods issue date, as we will see in our next topic, which is scheduling. Now, shipment scheduling basically refers to the process that the system goes through in determining particular dates that are critical to the delivery cycle. These dates are namely the staging date, the loading date, transportation planning date, and the goods issue date. And the system comes up with these dates in one of two ways. That's either backward scheduling or forward scheduling. So to start with, backward scheduling, as the name suggests, the system subtracts a series of dates from the required delivery date in order to come to a conclusive material availability date. Typically, the system is going to take the required delivery date and subtract transit time that it obtains from the route to come up with a goods issue date. From the goods issue date, it's going to subtract loading time, and that will bring it to the loading date. From the loading date, the system is going to subtract lead time to come up with the transportation planning date, and at the same time picking and packing time to bring it back to the material availability date. So that's basically how a backward scheduling occurs. The system is calculating backwards from a requested delivery date. So there are instances where the system will calculate backward scheduling and come up with a material availability date. But unfortunately, on that material availability date, there is no available stock in our storage locations. So now the natural choice, or what the system does next, is it's going to perform forward scheduling. And this is when it picks a material availability date after having performed an availability check that is reasonable to determine the next possible date where stock is going to be available. And it uses this suggested staging date to calculate further dates. Now, instead of subtracting, as it was doing in backward scheduling, the system is now adding those 4 timelines to that material availability date, and it proposes, as a result, a new delivery date. Well, that will have to just about do for this session. Thank you very much for joining me, and do join me for the next session, in which we'll be going further, looking at our goods issue processes, and possibly we're going to give an introduction to transportation planning. Thank you very much for joining me. Have a good one.